Poison types have a very special place in my heart, ranging all the way from venomous animals to big piles of goo. These guys are far from garbage. So today I'm gonna see if I can be a Pokémon Y Hardcore Nuzlocke using only poison types. The rules are simple. Any fainted Pokémon must be permanently boxed, and we can only catch the first poison type encounter in any area. There are a lot of potential encounters in this run that are amazing, so let me know your all-time favorite poison type down in the comments below. And with that said, let's begin our adventure in the Kalos region, where we are very rarely woken up by a fletchling. I then go downstairs where my mom tells me I can't go outside in my pajamas. How dare you, mom? So after getting dressed, the game introduces us to all of our friends who respectively call me by my official title, S-Meister. It honestly didn't matter who I chose for my starter, therefore I just picked Chespin, since my main rival Serena can get Delphox, which is usually the Pokemon that'll give us the most trouble. A love letter. Wait, what? Either way, our real journey starts when we venture on into Sanaloon Forest. As I was being relentlessly chased by Shauna, we did manage to find our first encounter, a Weedle. I named her Francine and noticed that she has a perfect nature, being timid. And soon after it's captured, Francine evolves into a Kakuna. And then at level 10, a Beedrill, which is an insanely terrifying creature. But sadly, it's the only poison type we can get before taking on the first gym. So it's gonna be up to Francine to defeat Viola and her bug types. And if you know anything about Beedrill, you might know that the only move that we can use against this gym is pretty much Fury Attack. Surskit foolishly went for Water Sport, thinking that we're going to use a Fire type move. But with us withstanding her pathetic Quick Attack, we inflicted several Fury Attacks without losing too much health. Unfortunately, on the next turn, we missed another one, due to Fury Attack being a move that only has an 85% accuracy. However, with Francine this time landing 3 hits, it was just enough to defeat Surskit. And with that, we gained enough experience to level up to level 13 and learned Focus Energy. Viola then sends out her next Pokemon, Vivian. This thing is a menace. Not only can she increase her defense with Harden, she can also do damage over time to us with Infestation. So knowing it was going to do 5 HP of passive damage every turn, Focus Energy came in clutch for us. This is because each Fury Attack is treated like a separate attack, with each strike being able to get a critical hit independently. And with us luckily letting 2 critical hits out of the 3 this turn, bringing her health into the yellow zone, we then followed up and did out a few more critical hits, and finally managed to take down the beautiful pink butterfly, meaning we beat Viola and obtained the bug badge. After a very close fight, I made my way to Route 4 where I encountered a wild Badoo. I was honestly quite pleasant since Arthur has a bold nature, which minus his physical attack and increases his defense. But since he's a special attacker, it was just right. We then arrive at our next destination in Lumiose City, where we meet up our potential stepdad, Professor Sycamore. And this guy got one of our worst nightmares, a fire type on his team named Charmander. It's safe to say that I need to take some preparation. Not really. By using Focus Energy, we destroyed the Bulbasaur with some Fury attacks, and absolutely annihilated the Charmander on the first turn with some lucky crits. And Squirtle, yeah, he wasn't even a challenge. Once we defeated him, we got our choice of Kanto starters. So I of course picked Bulbasaur. I named my Bulbasaur Buster and then was fortunately given the Venusaurite. Fine, I guess I'll accept you as my dad. Just as we were about to happily leave the lab, we ran into Lysandra, a guy who makes the Holo Caster and is flirting with some girl? Oh my, are you serious again? I mean, I guess she is the Kalos Pokemon League champion and Kalos' top model, so it makes sense. As we're leaving Lumiose City, we ran into Mr. Bonding, who says he wants to show me his O power and that's it's bonding time? Get out! But here on Route 5, I found myself a Gulpin and named him George, and he got a sassy nature. Shortly after, Buster evolves into an Ivysaur. With that, we now have to retrieve the Pokemon Flute that was stolen by some rich dude, since this guy is blocking the whole pathway. On our way to the mansion on Route 6, there were 2 Pokemons that I could catch, and that's Oddish and Venipede. And of course, I picked Odd Venipede and called her Muffy, and her neutral nature at least isn't bad. It turns out we can't even enter Perfum Palace if we don't pay 1,000 bucks. Then we had to go through the tedious process of hunting down this guy's dog in his massive backyard. After which, we celebrate because the worst part of the game is finally over. Wait, fireworks in the morning? So with that, this guy finally decided to give us the flute. Now, you over there, get lost. I'm sorry. At this point, it's a straight shot to the second gym, but we can get a few encounters. And first off is Binky the Krogan, who ends up having a lonely nature, which is plus physical attack, so I will definitely take it. Our next encounter is Zubat, which I named her DW. Sadly, we got a bold nature, which decreases her physical attack. However, Crobat is one of my favorite Pokemon, so I decided to replace Gulpin for her. While getting to the level cap of the next gym, our team get massively powered up, as Arthur evolves into Roselia, Muffy into Whirlipede, and DW into a Golbat, which means it's finally time for a second gym challenge versus Grant and his rock types. Now, Grant can be a real headache in monotype runs. This is because Amora has the ability to refrigerate, therefore his takedown becomes an ice type move, which is extremely dangerous against our whole team. Thankfully, we landed the 75% accuracy sleep powder, thus I decided to switch out Arthur for Buster. With Amora still fast asleep, this gives us the opportunity to go for a growth to increase our special attack. And luckily, he was still sleeping like a true champ, so with our powered up Giga Drain, we obliterated the Amora, which now means Grant sends out his last Pokemon, Tyrant, and then his strong jaw ability is something that we should be afraid of, is what I would like to say, but that's Grant defeated and Cliff badge unlocked. As I try to leave Geosinge Town, we run into Karina and her 2 Lucarios. Little does she know that I already have the best fighting type and she get absolutely destroyed with Binky's Revenge. This then gives us access to Route 11, where this time there are 3 encounters that we can possibly catch, being Nidorino, Nidorina, and Stunky. Fortunately, I ran into a Nidorino and I named him Brain, who has a splendid jolly nature, making him an absolute unit. Therefore, bye bye Beedrill. I then started moving through the Reflection Cave where I found myself a Moonstone, and of course I used it on Brain, leading him to evolve into the almighty Nidoking. And then after defeating a Doduo, DW's friendship reaches a high enough level where it evolves into a Crobat. Not only that, Muffy also evolves into a Scolipede. Once we reach Shallow City, we then made our way to the Tower of Mastery, where we now have to prepare ourselves as we begin our first rival fight with Serena, in order to decide who gets the Mega Ring. And Serena is an extremely difficult obstacle for us. This is because she has 2 Psychic types on her team who 100% overpower our whole squad. But with us outspeeding and luckily hitting a crit, we defeated her Meowstic, forcing Serena to send out her ace Brexin. Since DW is pretty bulky in terms of special defense, we will hardly survive the first Psy Beam, but just in case, I confused him. With Brexin hitting himself, on the following turn, I then went for a bite as he thankfully used Fire Spin, giving us another chance to inflict a bit more damage with bite. But since he went for a Fire Spin again, this allows us to outspeed him and take him out with the last bunch, meaning there's only 1 more to go. So Serena then sends out her last Pokemon Absol, which isn't too much of a problem, but with DW most likely feigning, I switched her out for Muffy, as she easily withstood the pathetic quick attack. And then employing 1 Bug Bite, we obliterated the Absol and beat Serena for the first time. So with that pathetic display of battle from Serena, we now have to face our next big opponent Karina and her gym forward fighting types. Since she started with Minfu, I used DW, as I anticipated that she'll go for a fake out first, but with DW having the ability Inner Focus, it prevented us from flinching. And with Minfu being one shot again, of course Karina has to go for another Hyper Potion. But thankfully we managed to land a crit with Wing Attack this time and defeated the Kung Fu Mouse. Hence, she then brought out her next Pokemon, Machoke. But with Machoke being pretty bulky, he tanked the Wing Attack and landed a super effective Rock Tomb, which lowered our speed. But it honestly didn't matter, with 1 more Wing Attack taking him out. Not only that, we gained enough experience to level up to level 33 and learn a powerful move, Acrobatic. Karina then sends out her last Pokemon, Hawlucha, but unfortunately for her, she only has fighting type moves to damage us, which would absolutely do nothing against a flying and poison type mon. And with us not holding any items, Acrobatic now does double the power of 55. So we easily destroyed Hawlucha, defeating Karina and obtaining the Rumble badge. Just before we leave Shallow City, I picked up the TMs for Dig and Poison Jab, which are going to be extremely useful for the upcoming battles. We then get access to Mega Evolution, but we can only Mega Evolve our Venusaur sadly. After defeating Karina once again, one of her Lucario wants to join me for the adventure, but I of course said no. Oh no, not another rival battle already. Phew. Thank you very much. Woo, look at me go. As I skip along with my Skiddo, I found myself a Shiny Stone, so I immediately used it on Arthur and evolved him into a Rose Raid. However, just before we take on the 4th gym, we picked up the Good Rod and received the HM for Fly. Oh no, it's her again. I guess it's now time to fight good old Serena once again. But since her team hasn't changed that much, we destroy her Meowstic with some powerful Poison Jabs, one shot breaks in with a super effective Dig, and annihilated the Absol with few power up punch. Not again. Am I a loser? Yes. While battling some trainers in the gym, Buster evolved into a Venusaur. So with that, we now have to take on the sweet little old man Ramos and his grass types. As strange as it feels to utter this next sentence, Ramos actually possesses a threat to us. I'm just kidding. As we defeated the Jumpluff with a single Acrobatic, making him bring out his ace Gogoat. And of course, he also goes down in what? Of course he also goes down in 1. Oh my, are you serious? Just die already. Okay, and of course he also goes down in 1. Therefore, he then sends out his next Pokemon, Weepinbell, and he definitely goes down with 1 attack. Thus, we defeated Ramos and received the plant badge. We then have to go through the desert and some Team Flare nonsense. And after beating this guy, he randomly announced that he lost his Power Plant Pass. I wonder who's dumb enough to leave it out here. So we then proceeded to the power plant where we defeated the Team Flare admin pretty easily. And Team Flare Eliana? Yeah, she stood no chance. We then run into AZ, who must have eaten like every single vegetable in existence as a kid. And with that, we are finally back in Lumiere City. Just before we take on the next gym, I backtracked a bit and picked up the TM for Sword Dance. But with that out of the way, it's now time to fight Clement and his team of electric types. Now, this battle can be a bit tricky since his whole team are pretty fast. But as he leads with his Emolga, I decided to lead with my ground type Brain, since he can prevent Emolga from using its most powerful move, Volt Switch. Even though we managed to poison him with our Poison Plant ability, we unfortunately got paralyzed from his static. However, with Brain taking taking the aerial ace on the following turn, with one more poison jab, the flying mouse was history, forcing Clement to bring out his next Pokemon, Magneton. Magneton went for Electric Terrain, which raises all electric type moves by 50% for 5 turns, but we somehow managed to bypass the static and landed the power up punch. However, with Magneton inflicting a powerful mirror shot and Brain being paralyzed, I switched him out for Buster, who easily withstood the incoming mirror shot, and of course, with no surprise, it's now time to Mega Evolve Buster into Mega Venusaur. And with Mega Buster on our team right now, Magneton was nothing, as it goes down with a super powerful deadly bulldoze, which now leads to Clement's last Pokemon, Heliolisk. Sadly for him, all his moves are pretty bad against Buster, being electric and grass type moves. So with one massive jump from Venusaur, make it 2, Heliolisk slips from the crack below him and he finally fainted. This means we defeated Clement and obtained the Voltage badge, which means we can now move on to Route 14 where we once again have to fight Serena. But this time, this battle ends up being one of the hardest we have had since the beginning of the run. This is because Serena has a fully evolved starter, being Delphox. Sadly, we got flinch on the first turn with Fake Out, so I then went for Sword Dance to increase our physical attack, so we can hopefully sweep through her whole team. Weirdly enough, Meowstic used Disarming Voice instead of Psychic, thus we outspeed her and took her out, meaning Serena then brings out her ace Pokemon Delphox. And this is where the tragic happens. This is because I thought Muffy would be faster than Delphox by looking at the average base stats for both Pokemon, but nope, am I wrong, as Muffy gets taken out with a single Mystical Fire. So with Muffy dead, I then brought out Brain, whose anger was building up so much that it overflows. He tanks the weak Mystical Fire, goes underground and dodges the Fox's attack, and then threw his entire body destroying the poor Fox. Therefore Serena then brought out her Absol, thinking that it would do something, but Brain wasn't done yet as he savagely punched the white beast once, twice being a crit, and obliterated the Absol. With Muffy's death, I then continued onto Route 14 where I found myself a Skorupi. Unfortunately, Prunella has a rash nature, therefore we get plus special attack and minus special defense, which is not ideal at all, since Drapion is a physical fighter. Not long after, Binky evolves into a Toxicroak, and with all of that done, it's now time to face off against the Fairy type user, Rivalry. And since I came with a team full of poison types, you can guess that this Fairy type user wasn't too happy about it. Anyway, the plan was pretty simple, which involved setting up a few Sword Dances. This is because Monwild only have Dark type moves which are ineffective against Binky. Honestly, we can just max out our physical attack with 3 Sword Dances, but I won't be doing that. Instead, 2 is enough. Therefore, Binky buried himself underground, so we then take out the Monwild with extremely powerful Dig, forcing her to bring out her next Pokemon, Mr. Mime. And unfortunately for her, Mr. Mime also goes down with a single attack. Sylveon is next, who also gets destroyed with one jab to the stomach. And that's Rivalry defeated and Fairy Badge unlocked. After defeating the gym, we then have to go save the Pokeball factory from more Team Flare nonsense. And I always thought this was pretty cool, since you get to see where the Pokeballs are made. So while we're saving the factory, Prunella gets to level 40, which means they evolve into a powerful Drapion. We then found out the Team Flare over here are angry at us for intruding. Like, come on, what do you think you're doing? So we then swiftly kick their butts. After we got rid of Team Flare, the guy that runs the factory gives us the choice of a Master Ball or a Big Nugget. Oh, that's an easy one. Of course I'll take this. No, I don't want that. Upon reaching the depths of the Frost Cavern, we then found these people again. Oh my, are you serious? Why are you even antagonizing an Abomasnow? And if you thought this game had any chill at all, well, you will be wrong, because we now have to face Serena again before we take on the next gym. I'm gonna be extremely honest here, because during this battle, I made one of the stupidest mistakes ever. Everything was going according to plan, as we easily defeated Meowstic with some Shadow Claws, Delphox with the usual Dig, and then switching out to Binky to set up some Sword Dance against Absol, and taking him out with a single Poison Jab. Everything was going smoothly until Jolteon comes out. Since Binky couldn't outspeed him, I decided to go for a Dig, believing that we'll survive a discharge. But nope, we did not. So with that, we lost Binky. Prunella then comes out next, as Jolteon goes for another discharge. But fortunately, we tank it this time, and went for a Bulldoze, and even lowering his speed, which was just enough for Prunella to outspeed him and annihilating the yellow dog, and avenging Binky. So with that, we defeated Serena and lost a total of 2 friends to her now. But just before we take on the next gym, I backtracked to Silage City, where I'd used a good rod to fish up a Squirtle, since I've never used one before on my team, and named her Jane. I mean, it is a dragon type, so it must be good, right? Alright, next in line of the Kalos gym leaders that nobody can seem to remember is Olympia and her Psychic types. And listen, Psychic is super effective against poison, but luckily we're Prunella being a poison and dark type. Therefore, Sigilyph cannot touch us with anything except for Air Slash. This allows us to go for 2 Sword Dances without even worrying about the flinch from the Air Slash, since we're also faster than her too. It's honestly an instant KO if we get a crit, since Prunella has the ability Sniper, which buffs the damage with critical hits by 1.5, but Continuing, unfortunately we did not take Slowking out with one move as she landed the Yawn. Olympia then goes for Hyper Potion, fully healing the Slowking, but thankfully we managed to land another crit, thus it leads to an instant obliteration. Sadly we do fall asleep now because of the Yawn. Her last Pokemon that she sends out is Meowstic, but since all her moves are ineffective against us, being Psychic, Fake Out, and Shadow Ball, I decided not to swap Prunella out since she still has the buff from the Sword Dance. We somehow luckily woke up just in time and landed the Night Slash and took her out. So with that, we defeated Olympia and received a Psychic badge. After the 7th gym fight, Serena would like to challenge us to another battle. However, thankfully Lysandra interrupts with his plan to end the world. So now it's time to put an end to Team Flare nonsense, which requires 3 more or less consecutive fights with Lysandra. We then learn that Lysandra password is Open Sesame, and this makes him absolutely furious. So we now have to find him in his super secret evil lair. He started off with a Mean Fu, which isn't that threatening on its own since it's not that fast until it evolved. But his high jump kick will hurt a lot. So after setting up 2 sword dances, I begun my domination. As I easily one-shot the Mean Fu with a crunch, the Gyarados 2 goes down with a single munch. Following was Pyro, who gets obliterated with a powerful bulldoze, and Morcro gets the final jab to his poor stomach. So that's it for the first Lysandra fight. Excuse me, what? We then run into AZ, who tells us about a great war where the ultimate weapon was used to cause great destruction. Is this just World War II in a Pokemon game? Get back here. I don't want to fight you. Anyway, Team Flare has probably the creepiest science guy in all of Pokemon, as he tells us we have to choose the right button or the world's gonna be destroyed? Surely the big red button can't be the bad one, right? Oh no. It turns out that button woke up the bacon bird. So in order to protect the world, I threw a Master Ball at it. I wonder if we could trade this back for another big nugget. So with that, it's now time for the final fight against Lysandra, where he decides to become a fusion of Dr. Octopus and Thanos. This battle can be a bit trickier than the last few, since his ace Pokemon really becomes a threat to us, as he too can also Mega Evolve. So thankfully with Minshao missing his high jump kick, this allows us to use another Sword Dance, as we tank the incoming attack. But with the +4 physical attack now, we obliterated the Minshao with a single powerful jab, forcing him to bring out his next Pokemon, Pyro. And sadly for him, Pyro gets one shot with the almighty bulldoze from Prunella. Next up was one of his newly evolved Honchkrow, and he too got destroyed with one poison jab. Unfortunately, this is where I made another stupid mistake here. As Lysandra Mega evolves his Gyarados into Mega Gyarados, I totally forgot that it changes its type from water and flying to water and dark. Thus, I accidentally went for a Crunch, which of course is ineffective and also leading to Prunella's death, as his Gyarados landed a super effective Earthquake. May you rest in peace with your other friends. So after realizing what type Gyarados truly is, we send out Buster, who immediately Mega evolved him into Mega Venusaur. And since the Water Snake loses his flying type, therefore Grass is now super effective against him. So with Buster withstanding the pathetic outreach, we annihilate the blue fish with extraordinary Petal Dance. So that's it for Team Flare's stupid plan, and Lysandra finally realizes his glasses are dumb. With the world save, we can now turn our attention back to the gym challenges. But just before that, the first thing we're gonna do is go back to Shallow City, where we fished up a Tentacruel and named her Ellen, who we immediately evolve into a Tentacruel, and then not long after, Jane evolves into a Dragoji. The next major challenge is the Rival Bridge on Route 19. The 3 back-to-back-to-back battles provide one of the game's only potential major challenges, especially since there's no healing between the first 2 fights. I'm just kidding, it wasn't too difficult, as Delcatty goes down with a single Brick Break. Gujo was a bit of trouble, but he still gets defeated with a few poison jabs. Greninja was next, so we switched out Brain for Arthur, who immediately one-shots the Blue Frog with a Giga Drain. And that's Shauna defeated, making Tiano our next opponent. And since Brain was too low from the last battle, I switched him out for Jane, who tanked 2 acrobatics in a row, and then takes down the Talonflame with a single Surf. Crawdon was up next, who gets painfully fried with a powerful Thunderbolt. So we then brought out Arthur's twin brother, hence I switched out Jane for DW, who lands a critical hit with acrobatic and taking the Roserade out. Thankfully for the next fight with Trevor, he kindly healed us, which was honestly the worst thing that he could have done for himself, as Brain swept through his whole team. And that's it for the rival battles. But after my bittersweet victory against my friend, it's time for the final gym challenge against Rolfric and his ice types. He begun the battle with a Bomber Snow, so I started off with Brain, and sadly Snow Warning activates. Thus we're going to be taking a bit of hail damage every turn for 5 turns. But since a Bomber Snow is also an ice and grass type mon, a single poison jab takes him out, which means Korogonal comes out next. So I immediately went for a Power Up Punch, almost taking it out, as he landed a Confuse Ray. And what's worse is that Wolfric went for a Hyper Potion. But actually this might help us, because we get to land a couple more Power Up Punch. This will allow us to gain more physical attack, so we can take out Avalugg, as his defense is off the chart. But with us only having +2 for physical attack, it wasn't enough to take him out. And sadly, Brain goes down from an Avalanche. However, we did manage to poison him because of Brain's Poison Plant ability. And since Avalugg's health wasn't in the danger zone, where he'll go for another Hyper Potion, this permits Jane to use Surf and take him out because of his weaker special defense. So with that, we defeated Wolfric and earned the Iceberg badge. With Brain's death, I decided to add Francine back to the team. And with that, we have made it to Victory Road. However, as we go through Victory Road, we have one final showdown with Serena before we face the Elite Four. She started off with Meowstic, so I went for DW, since she always starts with a Fake Out, which would not work on us this time because of DW's inner focus ability. early. So after 2 bites, we easily defeated Meowstic. Delphox was up next, and just like always, she was deadly as ever. The evil fox bypassed the confusion and inflicted a super powerful psychic on us, which we barely survived. However, I chose not to swap out DW as it might get pretty risky for the others. But somehow we managed to land a bite, and with him hitting himself, we took him out. Jolteon comes out next, so I switch out DW for Jane, who easily withstood the discharge because of her crazy special defense. And unfortunately for the dog, Jolteon could only use discharge on us, since her other moves are ineffective against Jane. So after 2 Sludge Bomb, the dog was defeated. Serena then brought out her new member Altaria, which we barely survived the Dragon Pulse, but still landed one of our own. So I then swap out Jane for Arthur, who comfortably tanks the incoming Dragon Pulse. And with 1 super effective Daisy Link Gleam, we annihilated the Altaria. Absol comes out next, but stood no chance at all as he gets destroyed with a single move. This means we defeated Serena without losing any casualty this time. See ya. And with that, we officially made it to the Pokemon League. From here, I already decided on the final build for the Pokemon on my team. First up, we got Arthur with Giga Drain, Growth, Daisy Gleam, and Double Team. Next up is Buster with Earthquake, Sleep Powder, Sword Dance, and Energy Ball. Then we got DW with Acrobatics, Confuse Ray, Double Team, and Bite. Following is Jane with Thunderbolt, Dragon Pulse, Sludge Bomb, and Surf. Next is Ellen with Sludge Wave, Surf, Ice Beam, and Daisy Gleam. And finally, we got Francine with Brick Break, Sword Dance, Poison Jab, and Agility. So now it's time for the ultimate challenge. And for the first Elite Four, we'll be taking on Wingstrom and his Steel types. This battle is going to be a bit challenging since Steel types are immune to poison. So with him starting with Klefki, I went with Buster. And the first thing I of course have to do is Mega Evolve Buster into Mega Venusaur. The whole strategy for this fight is honestly just setting up Sword Dances with Buster to raise our physical attack as high as we can. And then hopefully we can sweep through his whole team. And with Klefki going for Spike instead of attack, another Sword Dance was employed. However, with him going for a Flash Cannon this time, which barely did any damage at all, on the next turn he went for a Torment. Thus, we'll not be able to use the same move twice in a row, making it harder for us, since Earthquake is the only move that we can use to most likely one-shot all his mons. And with no surprise, the Energy Ball did not take out the Probopass out, as he landed a crit with Flash Cannon. But believing that his next Pokemon is Sizzle, who's extremely resistant to Grass-type moves, I went for another Sword Dance. This is carried out so I can defeat Probopass with an Energy Ball, and then can utilize Earthquake against Sizzle, due to the Torment not allowing us to use Earthquake twice. So with Sizzle defeated, Wingstrom then brought out his Aegis Slash, and since we can't use Earthquake again, I went for a Sleep Powder instead, and thankfully we landed it, as we'll most likely lose Buster if he landed any attack on us. So with Aegis Slash fast asleep now, a single Earthquake annihilates the Broken Sword, and that's the first Elite Four defeated. The second member I've decided to go for is the Fire-type specialist Melva. The reporter starts off with a Pyro, hence I begun the battle with Jane, since her high bulky defense will allow us to tank like literally all of their moves. She started off with a Noble Roar, reducing all of our attacks, as I did half her health with a super effective Surf. She then went for Hyper Voice, which surprisingly did a good amount of damage, but with another Tsunami on the way, the Fierce Lion drowns to death. Next up is the Fire Snail, who has exceptionally high defense. Thus, I went for Surf being a special attack move, and thankfully she did not go for a super effective Earthquake, as Jane might have perished there. But with Turkle having even worse speed than Jane, we outspeeded her and drowned the snail, forcing her to send out the Firebird Talonflame. Luckily, the bird did not have any super effective move against us, but she did however has 2 120 base power moves, and with us luckily landing a Surf with a crit, we defeated the Talonflame, making her bring out her last Pokemon, Chandelure. And with Chandelure speed being far superior than Jane, who most likely died in one move, I switched her out for Ellen, who easily withstood the incoming Shadow Ball. Thankfully, Tentacles are generally faster than a Lamppost, so we landed a powerful Surf first, and with Chandelure's health being that low, Melva undoubtedly goes for a full restore. But with us luckily bypassing the confusion, we managed to defeat the Lamppost with one more Surf, meaning we defeated the second Elite Four, Melva. The third Elite Four we'll be facing up against is Drasna and our Dragon types. Dragon types are probably the most overpowered type in the game, except for maybe Fairy types. And the only saving grace here is that Drasna thankfully doesn't have any of the good ones. But she does however withstood an Ice Beam and inflicted a somewhat damaging Thunderbolt. So on the next turn, I then commanded Ellen to shoot out even more ice from her mouth, as Dragoji lands a Thunderbolt but with a crit this time. And of course, she then annoyingly goes for full restore. But we did land an Ice Beam before switch out Ellen for Buster, as she was gonna die on the following turn. Buster then comes out and easily ate the Thunderbolt like nothing. With Buster on the field now, we obviously have to Mega Evolve him into Mega Venusaur. And with his stat increased drastically, a single powerful Earthquake annihilates the Dragon Squid, forcing Drasna to bring out her next Pokemon, Noivern, who has the ability Frisk, therefore stealing my Venusaur right. Wait, how am I still Mega Evolve even? But with the bat landing an Air Slash, it was looking very bad for Buster. But we somehow managed to land a Sleep Powder once again before I switch out Buster back for Ellen. And with Noivern still fast asleep, this gave us the chance to land the almighty Ice Beam. Sadly, Drasna then goes for a full restore, hitting the dragon all the way and removing the status condition. So I then inflicted one more Ice Beam before swapping out for DW. And with DW coming out, he tanks the incoming Dragon Pulse, and luckily with DW having greater speed than this bat, we outspeeded him and finished her off with an Acrobatics. decks. Next up is Altaria, and with Altaria not having any effective move against DW, I went for an Acrobatics, and fortunately she missed her singing lesson, so with one more attack, the cotton candy goes down. Therefore, it's only Druddigan that's left. It was honestly pretty risky, but I went for another Acrobatics as she landed a Dragon Tail, but thankfully we barely survived it. And I was honestly so grateful when I saw Ellen being the one that got dragged out onto the field, so we outspeeded her and took down the last dragon, thus defeating Drasna and moving on to the final Elite Four. This means the final Elite Four will be challenging is Seabold and his water types. He's probably one of the easier ones for us out of the four, since we have a few grass types on our team and even some having electric type moves. And just as we expected, with Arthur annihilating Krowitzer with a single Giga Drain, forcing him to send out his next Pokemon Starmie. But sadly for him, Starmie also gets his soul drained by Arthur, meaning it's now time for the most troublesome one out of the bunch, being Gyarados. And since Arthur doesn't have any super effective move against this beast, I swapped him out for Jane. It was honestly pretty risky since Gyarados has Ice Fang and Earthquake, which might potentially one-shot Jane. But oh my, we got extremely lucky surviving the power of Earthquake and landed the quad effective Thunderbolt. Therefore, Barbacle comes out next, and with Jane being too low to fight, I switch her out for Arthur, who easily withstood the pathetic Stone Edge. And with no surprise, the magnificent Arthur takes the Rockman out with one move. This also means we finally defeated the last Elite Four and moving on to the final battle. Now, there's only one trainer standing in between me and victory for my poison types. So with a full team and no losses versus the Elite Four, it's time to take on Diantha. She leads with Hawlucha, and I lead with who I believe was the MVP of this run, being Arthur. There's actually another reason why I started with Arthur, and that reason is Hawlucha doesn't have any flying type moves or any super effective move against Roserade, therefore allowing us to use a couple of double teams and potentially growth, as her next Pokemon, such as those fossil ones, will be extremely painful to fight against if we don't power up our beautiful Arthur. So with Hawlucha going down with one move, she then brought out her first fossil Pokemon, Aurorus. And luckily this thing is pretty slow, so Arthur outspeeds him and obliterates him with a single Giga Drain, which is perfect as it fully heals us too. Thus, her next Pokemon is Goodra. And thankfully this gooey dragon is not faster than our precious Arthur, so we inflicted a powerful Dazzling Gleam and just survived the Fire Blast. But with one more attack, Goodra goes down. So Diantha then sends out an extremely scary T-Rex called Tyrantrum, but I guess it was just all looks as he gets destroyed with some pretty flowers. Arthur's doing exceptionally well right now carrying the squad, but with Gorgas being the next Pokemon, he somehow managed to survive the almighty Dazzling Gleam. And with her going for Phantom Force, this means Arthur's gonna die here. Hence, I switch him out for DW, and DW easily tanks the attack. And with Diantha using a Forest Store, I just went for another bite, and another one, flinching her this time. And then with the last bite being a crit, we took down the scary ghost, which means it's time for the final Pokemon, Gardevoir. And she of course immediately Mega Evolves her Gardevoir into Mega Gardevoir, which is going to be very dangerous against our poison types. Therefore, I went for Confuse Ray, so we can somewhat have a chance to survive against this monster. And with a miracle of a critical hit with Acrobatic, we took her down before she starts destroying the team. And with that, we have defeated Diantha and became the champion of Kalos. And so despite all the problems I had along the way, I done it. I beat a Pokémon Y Hardcore Nuzlocke using only poison types. And that goes to show poison type is amazing. I had a great time revisiting Kalos and using Pokemon that I usually don't use. And yeah, that's all for me. Feel free to comment down any recommendation or improvements that I can make. So until next time, goodbye.